What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic?
Why can't women become priests?
1-800-585-9396.
What's stopping?
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-800-585-9396.
What's stopping?
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Call to Communion. This is the program for our non-Catholic brothers and sisters. We try to answer those questions that you may have floating around in your subconscious, and then all of a sudden it bubbles up into your conscious thoughts, and you're thinking, yeah, why do those Catholics feel like such and such? Or why do they believe this? Why do they not believe this? Well, why not get some answers to those questions? Give us a call, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. You can also text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for the automated response there, and then just text us your first name and your question. Message and data rates may apply. They apply for some folks, not for others, but we got to let you know in any event. So that's the deal, and our phone number again, 1-800-585-9396. You can also send us an email if you prefer that, ctc@ewtn.com, ctc@ewtn.com. And for those of you watching us on YouTube, you can always ask your question right there and then. Rich Jesse is our producer today. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Looks like, I think, who's handling the phones, Rich? Is that Mr. Burson? It's Elena. All right. Elena Rodriguez is our guest phone screener today, and Jeff Burson's handling social media. I'm Tom Price, along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
Great, and great to see you over the weekend as we celebrated a sacrament. How cool was that? Actually, two sacraments, the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass and our producer, Michael McCall, getting married.
Yay!
That was the coolest.
Mm-hmm. It really was.
A beautiful Mass, truly awesome. And then we all got to break bread at the reception, and it was a wonderful thing to get to visit with everybody and see our dear friend off into his new life, going off into the sunset.
Well, yep, and what I think one of the most memorable parts of it for me was Father Bob Sullivan of St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church here in Birmingham, Alabama, preached a homily where he related the first reading from the book of Tobit, where Tobias and Sarah pray that God will smile on their marriage, basically, because they have noble intentions. And Father Bob said, look, this is what we're doing when we offer the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. We're beginning this couple in their life of marriage together with the holiest prayer of the Church, the Mass.
That's right.
And I thought that I saw him this morning, actually, and I said, a lot of times I hear a homily, 2 days later I couldn't tell you what it was about. That one stuck in my head.
Well, yeah, and he you can learn a lot in a Mass during the homily and at other times, but especially the homily. And I think because there were a lot of non-Catholics there in attendance, he chose this teaching moment to talk a little about the Book of Tobit. Tell us a little about the Book of Tobit. That's not something that is found in every Bible out there, right?
Well,
every Catholic Bible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, it was a wonderful opportunity, and as a teaching moment, I thought it was fantastic. So in just a moment here, we're going to get to the phones and answer some questions. We're going to lead off today, though, with a quick email here from Samuel. He says, I have a question regarding the Bible. Do Catholics really believe that the Protestant Bible is corrupted in its current form? If this is true, why didn't God stop this corruption from happening if he is all-powerful? Thanks, guys. Again, that's from Samuel.
Okay, so the question from Samuel is, do Catholics believe that the Protestant... Well, he uses the word corrupted. I'd prefer to use the word incomplete.
Incomplete.
All right. Well, manifestly and obviously so.
Sure.
Because the Catholic Bible has 7 books in it that a lot of Protestant Bibles lack.
Mm-hmm.
Well, either those 7 books were inspired by God and should be included in the canon of Christian Scripture or not. All right? You can't have it both ways. And so either the Church has the authority from God to bind and loose and to teach the faith and hand on the deposit of faith authoritatively down through the centuries, which is what Catholics hold based on the teaching of Jesus, right? Or it doesn't. and one of or other of those two canons is either the right one or they're both wrong. Those are your only logical options.
Sure.
All right. You can't both be true. All right. So it's no threat though to the doctrine of God's omnipotence to claim that God allows human beings to fall into error. All right. I mean that's of course he does. All right. And this is one of the reasons why he gave us the Catholic Church as an authoritative voice to hand on the deposit of faith, so that when we have questions about things like, is God a Trinity or not? Is Jesus really God or not? What books belong in the Bible or don't? Whatever the theological question might be, and many questions have been raised in the history of theology, we have a go-to source to hand down the teaching of the faith once for all in an authoritative way and to guard it from error.
Very good. It's 8 minutes after the hour. In a moment here, we'll hear from Michelle in Louisiana. Danny, who is also in Louisiana, he's in Mandeville. We've got a line open for you right now, 1-800-585-9396. If you have a question for Dr. David Anders, 1-800-585-9396. 8 after, this is Call to Communion on EWTN.
Sharing the fullness of the Catholic faith. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
I invite people to tune in to Women of Grace Live if they want to be encouraged, if they want to be instructed, if they want to be inspired. These opportunities present themselves not only through what we have to share on the air, but through the many calls that come in through our listeners. I am always amazed at how my own faith is edified through what our listeners share with us. I'm Janet Benkovic, inviting you to join me weekday mornings at 11 Eastern for Women of Grace on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
CNA is the only fast, reliable, and free Catholic news source that brings blogs, stories, opinions, and more to your fingertips. For the latest Catholic news, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com, an online service from EWTN News.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
One time I came home from the office and I said to my grandmother, who had 11 children, opened up the saloon at 5 o'clock in the morning, raised 11 kids. I said, boy, I was nervous today, Grandma. She looked at me and she said, what are nerves? I looked like she was something from another world, and I said, huh? She said, what are nerves? Oh, I said, forget it, Grandma. I gave her a kiss on the cheek and I said, you'll never know. And she didn't. She took the present moment and she raised her kids and helped my grandfather in the saloon. And they lost everything in the Depression. She took that in her stride, and she was a holy woman. That's holiness, see?
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Hello, this is Father John Paul Mary.
This is Debbie Georgiani, co-host of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
My friends, this is Bishop Kevin Vann of the Diocese of Orange. I want to thank you very much for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
Welcome back, 10 after the hour. Glad you could join us today for the Monday edition of Call to Communion here on EWTN. One line open at the moment, 1-800-585-9396. And again, if you'd like to text us, just text the letters EWTN to 55000. Let's begin here with Michelle in Louisiana, listening to EWTN Radio on FM 90.5. Hi, Michelle. What's on your mind today?
Well, I was just... the question was becoming a Catholic.
Yes.
And I shared with you earlier that I was Catholic for many, many years, and how eventually I was going through a separation and then a divorce, and I attended another church, and then my family told me I needed to come back and make my duties and go to confession, and the priest told me since I attended another church for a few months, which I know in my heart that God had led me there for my children, because they were like 3 and 2, and I had been having struggles with them attending church on Sunday because they would really, there was no Sunday school or nursery, And anyway, the priest, when I went to confession and decided to please my family to make my Easter duties, the priest told me he was not going to absolve me because I had attended another church. And I thought, oh my God, I could not even understand how he couldn't give me absolution. I mean, I didn't go in there and said I had murdered somebody or committed adultery.
Okay, Michelle, let me speak to that if I could. And I really appreciate the call. And obviously, I'm responding as well to what I hear in your voice more than even in your words is the hurt that you've experienced.
Yes.
Okay, and I want to speak to that. It never happens, or at least it's not supposed to happen in the law of the church, that a priest withholds absolution because of the gravity of the offense. In other words, you mentioned, well, I didn't go murder anybody. Well, even if you had gone and murdered somebody, if you'd gone and committed genocide and wiped out everybody in another continent, there's no sin whatsoever at all for which a priest would withhold absolution. I mean, there's actually a couple of reserved sins, but it's not about the gravity of the offense. You could kill a gazillion people, and the priest can still absolve you. The condition under which a priest will not grant absolution is if a person says that they're not sorry. All right, that's when, and then it's not a judgment call on his part. He's actually not allowed to. All right. Because as a condition for God's forgiveness, we have to be sorry for our sins. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't in that confessional, and I don't know what transpired, but this is what I'm imagining happened, okay? I think, based on what you've told me, when you said, I left the Catholic Church, I went to another religious community for a while, and now I'm coming back because my family wants me to, he may have discerned you saying, and I'm not sorry that I did that. I'm not sorry. Well, The reason that he would withhold absolution in that circumstance is that the moral obligation to worship God according to Christ's directives, all right, as Jesus has instituted, that's something that is not made up by the Catholic Church. This is something that's delivered to us by Christ. And the unity of the church, St. Paul, in his letter to the 1 Corinthians, says that it's not a question. It's mandatory that there be unity in the faith. And Jesus said the same thing in John 17. He prayed to the Father and said, Lord, I pray that all those who believe in me will be one, so that the world can know that I came from you. All right? Visibly one in a way that other people, non-believers, could see. That means that we have a moral obligation to remain in fellowship with Christ through the church that he founded, even when the members of that local community are unfriendly.
Yeah.
Just like I have a moral obligation. If I go home to my house one day and my wife and kids are unfriendly, I don't go, well, maybe they're friendlier next door and wander over and, pick up with another family. No, I have to go in the family that God created.
Sure.
All right. The same thing holds with our obligations to church. Now, if I go in a church, I'm in a Catholic church and folks are unfriendly, what's my response? Let me see what I can do to make this place friendly. That's my response. Okay.
Sure.
But again, God loves you, and I believe in your sincerity. And the way you've told the story, I think you had no ill will whatsoever at all in mind, but neither did the priest. He's just trying to do God's will and follow the law of the church, which again proceeds from the reality that there's one church founded by Christ, to which we're all called to belong, to show forth that unity in the faith that Jesus intends.
Michelle, we hope that's helpful for you. It's 15 after the hour, and we're going to go to another Michelle. This Michelle is in Ohio. Hi there, Michelle. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, I'm a convert for quite a few years now, and this has always been a burning question for me, and it's always been a little bit irritating. I completely, 100% believe that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. And, but whenever anyone, myself included, poses the question or even just says, I was always wondering, perhaps Mary and Joseph went on after Jesus was born and did have a couple of children by having normal marriage relations. That usually gets people pretty worked up. The priest, the deacon, And it's always kind of irritated me a little bit because some things we don't have the answers to until we're in heaven and we can pose those questions to God himself. I know that the Catholic stand has been, there's no way, no how, but it kind of bothers me as a woman. I'm not saying that it's the way it is, I'm saying I perceive it sometimes as, thinking that, well, somehow if Mary, after the virgin birth, were to have sexual relations with her husband Joseph, somehow that would make her less holy, less, you know what I mean? And
sure.
So that's always kind of, I've struggled with that one. I mean, I know that I'm absolutely fine if Mary had relations with her husband once Jesus was born of her when she was a virgin.
Sure,
but
sure.
The church doesn't seem to be okay with even thinking that maybe we'll learn someday when we get all our answers that they may have went on to have children.
Michelle, I can speak to that, and I really appreciate the question. And I agree with you about one thing, and that is that God has not revealed to us everything that ever happened in human history.
Right.
He has not revealed to us everything that happened in the life of Mary and Joseph and Jesus and the Holy Family. All right. However, he did reveal something about this question. All right. It is definitively taught by divine revelation that Mary was perpetually a virgin. Okay? That is not something that the Catholic Church made up after the fact. It is something that has been handed down by divine revelation through sacred tradition. You know, a lot of what we know about the Christian faith comes to us from sources other than the Bible. All right, even though we can find the doctrine of perpetual virginity in Scripture, all right, implicitly, but even if we didn't have the Bible, we are not dependent on the Bible to deliver to us the contents of Christian faith. You know, Jesus didn't write anything down at all. Everything that he taught was oral, and all of it he committed to the apostles, to the 11, with the command, go into all nations and make disciples and teach them everything that I've commanded you. And we read the apostolic writings, we find that the apostles don't refer back to the writing in the New Testament. They refer back to the oral tradition they received from Jesus. All right. And so the Catholic faith, together with all Christians for 2,000 years, understand not only the Bible, but also sacred tradition as a bearer of divine revelation. And this is a doctrine taught clearly in sacred tradition, and then again promulgated in an authoritative way by the magisterium of the Church, declaring with the authority given to it by Christ, whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. The gates of hell will not prevail against you, that Mary is perpetually a virgin. So this belongs essentially to the deposit of faith, and to deny the doctrine would be heresy. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, but you're right, we don't know everything. So let me deal with the second question. Given that God has revealed this, what can we discern about the nature of the Holy Family, about virginity, about human sexuality? Does it mean, for instance, that human sexuality is somehow bad? And the answer to that question is absolutely not. All right? Absolutely not. Earlier in the show, we were talking about the book of Tobit, for instance, in the Old Testament, which clearly celebrates the sexual union of a man and a woman for the sake of raising a family, and invokes God's blessing on that as his intent. All right? And that is the command that God gave to Adam and Eve, in fact. When he created, he gave them a command. Be fruitful and multiply. And we know how that happens. We know where babies come from.
We do.
Okay? So this is a good and holy thing. It's a righteous thing. Okay? So why then was the Blessed Virgin Mary committed to perpetual virginity? All right? Well, you begin to unpack the logic, I think, when you understand that Mary stands in an analogous position to Eve. Eve, who, through her participation in the sin of Adam, brought about the ruin of the human race through original sin, was the mother of the living, all of those who are biologically her descendants. Right? Mary, in contrast to Eve, when Eve said no, Mary said yes. At the Annunciation, the angel came and said, "You're going to give birth to the Messiah." She says, "Be it done to me according to your word." Her assent, her agreement, her willing participation was a real instrumental cause of the incarnation of the Son of God. When we become Christians, we are baptized into Christ's body. All right. So in a spiritual sense, but in a very real way, Mary becomes the mother of all those who have been reborn in Christ, not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. All right, and as such, she becomes for us an icon of what real spiritual generation looks like, which is to bring forth faith in the heart in the life of everlasting holiness with God in heaven, rather than the physical generation of children on earth, even though that's a natural good. Okay? Mary is the second Eve. Mary is the mother of God. Mary participates in the most perfect form of consecration to God, which is actually, Scripture tells us, the life of perfect chastity. It's not the calling that everyone has. Not everyone is called to that kind of perfect continence, I should say, all right, to celibacy, all right? But it is the more perfect way. Christ himself, of course, was called to a life of perfect continence. He never took a wife, except the bride of Christ, the church.
Right.
He didn't have sexual relations with a woman. St. Paul, in his letter to the 1 Corinthians, says it's okay to marry, but if you have the gift, it's better if you give yourself in the single life totally committed to the service of the Lord. Because a man who is married cares about the affairs of his family, but the single man can give himself entirely to the service of the church. Jesus, when asked about, will we have husbands and wives and children in heaven, says, no, we'll be like the angels. This is Matthew chapter 19. We'll be like the angels in heaven who don't marry nor are given in marriage. All right. Some people, says Christ, even make themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. So it's fitting that Mary, as the icon of perfect Christian discipleship, would be at once a married woman in the Holy Family and a model for all Christian motherhood, and the perpetual virgin whose life is totally consecrated to God in utter purity, and a model for all Christian religious who take those vows of perfection.
Michelle, thank you so much for your call. 23 after the hour. That opens up a line for you right now. 1-800-585-9396. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. We go to Mert in Colorado Springs, listening to EWTN Radio on Sirius XM 130. Hey, Mert, what's on your mind today?
My question is about the Good Samaritan that helped that victim of the robbery victim, and the two people passed them by. I assume one was a priest, they were Jews. Now, what religion is the Good Samaritan? Did he believe in God?
Yeah, sure. So the Samaritans were from the northern part of Israel. You know, at the time of the Exodus, the 12 tribes of Israel moved into the Promised Land, and they divided around ancient Canaan, north and south. And that single geographic entity, was maintained under the monarchy of David and Solomon. All right, it was one country, one nation called Israel with a single king. And God had imposed by prescript that they could only offer sacrifice in Jerusalem. All right, eventually the temple was built by Solomon. But under the reign of Solomon's son Rehoboam, there was a civil war, and the nation was split into two. So you had the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And the northern kingdom, there was always a struggle with those that wanted to be faithful to the revelation that had come through Moses about whether or not to go worship in Jerusalem. And obviously the northern kings didn't like that because they wanted to maintain their political independence. Sure. So there was some tension there. And then the Assyrians came and wiped them out in the 7th century and carried them off into exile in Syria, all right, and brought other people in to move into the northern kingdom. And so the remnants of the Israelite people in the north intermarried and they had a belief in the God of the Bible, but they didn't have all the canonical scriptures that the Jews of the southern kingdom had. So they didn't have the whole Bible that Jewish people have today. They had what's called the Samaritan Pentateuch, which is a different version of the Bible, and they didn't follow the religion of the Jews. All right. So did they believe in the God of Abraham? Yes, they did. Did they follow the ritual prescriptions of the law the way the Jews in the south did? The answer is no.
Okay. Is that helpful for you, Mert?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You are most welcome. Our phone number here, 1-800-585-9396. 1-800-585-9396. If you're in a texting mood, and a lot of people do like to text these days, you can text the letters EWTN to 55000. Then just wait for our response. It'll be a little robo thing, and then just text us your first name and your question. Again, text the letters EWTN to 55000. Coming up on a break here, in a moment we'll be talking with Danny in Mandeville, Louisiana. Fascinating question here about cremation, and cremation is one of those topics that comes up probably about once a week. Isn't that about right, David? About once a week we tackle something on cremation. And also Steve has a question regarding Muslims, which I think you'll find fascinating as well. We do have a line open for you right now, 1-800-585-9396. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. Do stay with us.
"60 Seconds" with Father Mitch Pacwa.
There's a constant spreading of indifference to religion. See that attitude, well, you've got your religion and I have mine, or I have no religion, but that's all up to you. It's all a personal choice. It doesn't matter. If you go to hell and fry, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does! And it matters to me if I do. Also, secularism. Well, we'll just keep religion out of it. That was never the intention of the founders of these United States. Don't buy that bologna sausage. The founders of this country were thoroughly religious, and they intended this to be a very religious country. And Thomas Jefferson, one of the people they sometimes say was irreligious. Thomas Jefferson said, this government cannot work if all we have are the laws. If we don't have religion to help people keep a sense of why they should keep the laws, it'll fail.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
From EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Wyatt Goolsby with an EWTN News Link. The Supreme Court starts a new term one justice short. Key cases involve separation of church and state and death penalty appeals. Pope Francis takes the first step in the process to determine whether Father Jacques Amel qualifies for sainthood. The Pope is waiving a 5-year waiting period to start the process. Amel was a French priest killed in July by ISIS. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump faces another tough week on the campaign trail after the New York Times reported the real estate mogul may not have paid taxes for nearly 2 decades. The defeat for a peace deal between the Colombian government and leftist rebels leaves the nation in a state of uncertainty. Supporters of the pact to end a decades-long civil war lost the vote by a razor-thin 49.8 to 50.2% margin. I'm Wyatt Goolsby with your EWTN News Link. Join us this evening for EWTN News Nightly.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
29 after the hour. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. How can you listen to EWTN? So glad you asked. AM and FM radio stations, YouTube, iHeartRadio, the EWTN app. We've got shortwave. It goes all over the world. Online streaming, SoundCloud, and, of course, our friends at Sirius XM 130. Plenty of ways to listen to EWTN. That's why they say EWTN is everywhere. Back to the phones we go here at 29 after. Danny in Mandeville, Louisiana, listening to us on Sirius XM 130. Danny, what's your question today?
Yes, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm a cradle Catholic. I have a daughter who's 22 years old and very devoted Catholic. Always has questions. And a friend of ours had passed away recently, and he was cremated, and his ashes were spread. And she asked us about that, and my wife and I told her that, Catholic faith, you're not supposed to spread the ashes, supposed to keep it in an urn, a container. And she couldn't understand that. She actually kind of compared it to the religious leaders in Jesus' day, how they imposed so many rules and regulations on the Jews. And so I had a hard time explaining that to her. And I wish Dr. David Anders was sitting right next to me when she was asking these questions.
Sure.
Whenever I don't have an answer, I try to call into your show, and I'm lucky to get in. So thank you for taking my call.
Well, I appreciate it, Danny. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So the comparison to ancient Pharisaism is interesting, and Christ probably singled out religious hypocrisy more than any other sin for censure, and he talked about a lot of sins. But I think nobody took more criticism from Christ than those that set themselves up as the authorities because they loved, greetings in the marketplace and to be called rabbi and take the highest seats at tables and all that kind of business.
Yeah.
And he warned against those who would bind up men's consciences and place burdens on them that they themselves were unwilling to lift. And, he criticized the Pharisees for tithing mint, dill, and cumin, but neglecting the weightier matters of the law, like law and justice and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So then that leaves us with the question, okay, well, I think we all see the sense in that. So how do you know if a religious prescription is just arbitrary or oppressive, all right, or whether it actually attains a real human good. All right. So obviously, nobody's going to criticize Christ for prohibiting murder, all right, because it's pretty easy to see that what's being prohibited here is a real, genuine evil and an offense against the dignity of the human person. All right. Likewise with adultery or, child abandonment. I mean, you could make your list of egregious sins, and nobody would accuse Jesus of, being a religious phony, or just seeking his own self-aggrandizement, falling under this kind of critique if he forbade those things. So what about the care of the human body? All right, even in death. That's really what we're talking about.
Right.
Does the law, the Catholic law in cremation, does this actually speak to a genuine intrinsic human good that needs to be preserved and respected? All right. And the answer, of course, is yes. Right? That is, that human beings are not just souls squeezed into dirt. All right. And that's a common view. All right. Either sometimes you meet a lot of people today that don't believe in the soul at all. All right. And they think that humans are just material objects, and when they die, they dissipate and there's nothing left. Or another very common view, it's common in other cultures and religions, like in Hinduism in India, but even, Gnostic traditions in the West, and even among some Christians who don't know their faith very well, think of the human person as if we're just jars of clay, all right, or, we're just this kind of receptacles in which this little homunculus, this little, if you've ever saw the Patrick Swayze movie Ghost, this kind of ethereal spirit dwells within and animates the body, and then when the body dies, it dissipates, and the ghostly thing floats away and goes wherever it goes, right? That's not the Christian, biblical, and Catholic understanding of the soul and body, all right? The Catholic understanding is the human person, that substance that is a human person, is a singular substance, a singular unity, all right? Not a meaningless hunk of flesh in which a soul has been squeezed like toothpaste into a tube, all right? Not like it at all, all right? But a singular substance that has both a material and an immaterial component. And the immaterial is easiest to see, when we practice intellection, when we use our rational faculties, and we can discern truth from error, truth from falsehood, the good and the bad, especially in our abstractive powers. That's easy to see in the case of mathematics. Here we're grasping realities that they're true, they're real, they're knowable, but they're not material. Aha. Right. So from that activity, we discern the human being also has an immaterial aspect, but not by way of this, radically dualistic idea where the body itself is unimportant to the human person. No, we are our bodies. All right. So much so that Christ did not come just to save our souls. Christ came to save us as beings, as human beings, and the Scriptures tell us over and over again that our whole self partakes of the redemption that we have in Jesus, that our bodies too will be raised from the dead and be made like Christ's body. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for the apostles to say of Christ, well, he died physically, but he rose spiritually. And you'll find a lot of people that try to read the resurrection of Jesus in that light. That's not what the Gospels say.
Right.
What the Gospels say is they went to the tomb, he wasn't there. He didn't just rise spiritually, he rose physically, and we ourselves will rise in just such a fashion. This is why, for instance, from antiquity, Christians have always not just cared for, but venerated the bodies of the holy martyrs and the saints.
Sure.
It's why the institution of relics is something very different from cremation. All right. Cremation, as Danny described it, is the dissipation, the dissolution of the body, literally casting it to the four winds. All right. But the veneration of relics is a powerful devotional testament to the fact that even that these very finger bones, if you will, are members of the body of Christ and to be treated with the utmost respect. Now carry that logic through to everything we think about the treatment of the human person, and you'll see that there's far more than arbitrary prescription going on in the Church's burial customs, but a profound statement on the dignity of the human person, body and soul.
Danny, we hope that is helpful for you and your daughter. Thank you for your call. 36 after the hour. And James is in Sweden. He is checking us out today on YouTube. Hey there, James. James questioned, the Orthodox say that Peter's primacy depends on his confession being Orthodox, and that the Apostolic Church was governed by a council, and that James was presiding over the first council. What is true?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. So let's talk about what orthodoxy means and how do we know what's orthodox. Well, orthodox means right teaching. Okay. All right. So what means did Christ establish for authoritatively transmitting the Christian faith and for guaranteeing orthodoxy? guaranteeing right teaching. Well, lo and behold, he gave us the institution of the papacy, all right, among other things. It's not the only thing. It's not the only organ of infallibility, but it's one established by Christ.
Sure.
And it's the one that's most manifest and clear in the Bible. The only time Jesus speaks explicitly about the foundation of the church, the only time, is in Matthew 16, when he tells us, quite frankly, that he's going to build the church on St. Peter. Peter, you're the rock, and on this rock I'm going to build my church. And the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it. And I'm going to give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. So by three distinct metaphors, he sets Peter off. The rock, foundation of the church's unity. Keys of the kingdom of heaven, binding and loosing authority. Okay? And so we can't discern what is orthodox apart from the church's unity in its foundation on the papacy. Now, when you look at orthodoxy itself, we have highest regard for Orthodox as sharing more closely with us in the apostolic tradition than any other Christian group. What counts as orthodoxy? The Orthodox themselves, I'm sorry to say, can't tell you with uniform accuracy. Is it the Assyrian Church of the East? Is it the Oriental Orthodox in Syria and North Africa? Is it the Byzantine Orthodox? And these traditions vary very significantly. They differ very significantly from one another, especially in the area of Christology, who Jesus was and what his relationship to God was. They don't teach the same doctrine. And if you ask them, how do you adjudicate those claims? How do you know if it's the Coptics or the Byzantines or the Assyrians who have it right? Well, they say, well, it's the Orthodox faith because it's the one we hold. They don't have a principled way of answering that question because they can't kind of get out of the circle.
Yeah.
All right. You have to have an authoritative interpreter of the tradition to determine what is and isn't Orthodox, and that was given to us by Jesus and the papacy.
Glad that you're watching us today in Sweden, James, on YouTube. Appreciate that. 38 after the hour. In a moment, we'll hear from Steve in North Carolina, also Tommy in Tallahassee, Kyle in Dayton, all coming up here on this edition of Call to Communion on EWTN.
Sharing the fullness of the Catholic faith. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Get an insider's look at the latest information from EWTN. Sign up for Wings, EWTN's weekly email newsletter. Get the latest information about live events, special features, and guests. Connect with EWTN on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Just go to EWTN.com and click on the Wings link to sign up. Don't miss a minute of all that's happening at EWTN. Get your wings today.
Jerry Usher. I'm really a revert. There are a lot of converts on Catholic radio, a lot of reverts, those who have come back to the faith. Well, I would describe myself as a revert, and ever since I came back to a practice of my faith, I started praying the rosary, going to even daily Mass, God has led me on an amazing journey and used me in a lot of incredible ways that I never dreamed would have been possible. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, Monday through Saturday, noon Eastern on EWTN Radio.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
Great radio straight ahead at 3 o'clock Eastern. John Martinoni answers your calls on apologetics on our very own flagship program, EWTN Open Line Monday. That'll be at 3 o'clock Eastern on many of these stations. Also at 4 p.m., Cresta in the afternoon for 2 great hours. Tonight at 6, Catholic Answers Live. Why do you reject Catholic morality? Wow, that should be interesting. And then tonight at 8 on EWTN Radio and Television, Mark Gamble joins Marcus Grodi on the journey home. He is a former evangelical, Presbyterian, and Episcopalian. And now here he is a Catholic. I wonder why. Well, we'll find out tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television. Sir?
While you're pumping EWTN programming, everybody put, I believe it's going to be November 5th, on your calendar.
Yes.
Because EWTN is going to air a 1-hour presentation on the film The Hidden Rebellion by producer Daniel Rabaudin about the French Revolution and the genocide of Catholics that took place in Vendée. This is something that's been stricken from the history books because it ain't politically correct to talk about it. But the first genocide in history in modern times was by an atheistic, progressivist government in France against Catholics. You got to learn about it. You can read about it at thehiddenrebellion.com and watch for the movie on EWTN on November 5th.
It is coming up, so be sure and check EWTN.com for the times in your area. Again, that's on November 5th. It's going to be a powerful program. Steve in North Carolina checking us out today on YouTube as well. Steve, what's your question today? Hey, Steve, where are you? Are you there?
I am here.
Go right ahead. You're on the air.
Okay, you guys, really enjoy listening to you and Dr. Anders.
Thank you.
I'm kind of like Dr. Anders. I read my way into the church, but this is something that's always I've talked to several different church members and about these dreams and visions that are going on throughout the Muslim world. I read a book by Tom Doyle. He's a Protestant missionary, and he had compiled short stories about these Muslims that had come through Christ through dreams and visions. You can literally watch these videos all day of these Muslims that's had encounters with Christ through dreams, and it's exploding. I watched it's been a couple years ago. I was watching a Q&A on YouTube. Is a Muslim professor, a former Muslim, now he's a Christian professor, another former Muslim who's now a Christian apologist, and another guy that was kind of, refereeing the Q&A. But they weren't even talking about dreams and visions. But somebody asked a question about it, and this professor, both of these Muslims, these former Muslims, had come to Christ through dreams and visions. And this professor said that he'd done a study of Muslims worldwide. He said he admitted it wasn't he said he's not a professional pollster, but he'd done his best, and he found that 7 out of 10 former Muslims come to Christ through dreams and visions.
David, have you heard about any of this?
I have heard about it. Okay, so I have a number of thoughts. First of all, I cannot tell you statistically how many converts to the Christian faith there are from Islam, in the last 20 years. I know that the number is not negligible, and we've had them call this radio show.
Sure have.
So I've firsthand experience with some of this. Okay,
Yep.
Obviously, I'm in no position to assess the validity or invalidity of any claim to private revelation, whether that comes from a Catholic mystic or from a Muslim convert. I can't tell you that I know that these things are veridical or true, that they've happened or not happened, but I understand that there are lots of anecdotes to this effect. Okay. Now, I ran around for a long time in the Protestant world. All right, and the charismatic Pentecostal world too, where there are a lot of claims to this kind of miraculous phenomenon. I'm not going to deny that it can happen. I'm not going to affirm that it's happened. I will say that I'm always, even within the Catholic Church, when Catholics make claims to miraculous phenomena, my initial position is one of critical reception, not outright skepticism, but I'm sensitive to the temptation to be sensationalistic. All right, and I've seen it in all kinds of religious communities.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and so, and I know, sometimes one story gets started, and the next thing you know, the thing mushrooms and takes on a life of its own, and a legend gets running that may or may not have any basis in fact. So, I'm sure that there are converts coming to Christ. It is entirely possible that it has been the response to some supernatural movement of the Holy Spirit like this, but I would be far from one to come down and declare that I know that to be the case. If anyone comes to faith in Christ, it's a supernatural event. That the grace of God has to precede all of our conversions, all right? And that's true. That's true whether I read a philosophical treatise that demonstrates the truth of the Catholic dogma on God, and I'm so taken up in the sublime beauty of the argumentation that I'm drawn to examine the Church more closely. God's supernatural work is involved there. It's just as true if I encounter, say, one of the miracle stories from the saints, or I see a miraculous healing in response to the veneration of a saint's relics, like they're used to confirm for the process of canonization. And that impels me to consider the Church's teaching more closely, and I come to faith. In both of those cases, the supernatural is still involved. And I believe that the Catholic faith, the Christian faith, has a very powerful appeal, both at the intellectual, the spiritual, the moral level. anybody encountering it in an objective way is going to be drawn to the beauty of that tradition. I also think there are probably socio-cultural and political dynamics at work in the world. The rise of fundamentalism, the disparaging of reason across cultural environments that would also draw people towards the consideration of Christ, the Logos, the Word, the reason of God that gives light to every man. All kinds of reasons why people from a lot of cultures would want to consider the Christian faith. That they do, I hear on this show, they call and they talk about their conversion to Christ with us. So I know what happens.
Absolutely. Appreciate your call, Steve. Let's go to Kyle in Dayton, Ohio, listening to EWTN Radio on AM 910, Sacred Heart Radio. Hey, Kyle, what's your question today?
Hi, thank you. So my question is about the activities or the priestly activities, what is allowed and not allowed in a confessional. I heard your question earlier today. And so, quick background, my son pulled a prank that he had planned with a teacher at Incarnation, his school that he grew up in. And, he got rightfully punished. But the teacher that planned the prank and, helped him, told him it was a good deal, basically threw him under the bus, lied and whatever. So I was pretty upset with the teacher. I left that church immediately. Quite frankly, I almost left the church immediately of this because it was so scandalous, and I was so angry. I went to a different church. My daughters go to an altar, and I went to that church. Nonetheless, I happened to sit, coincidentally, right next to this guy, right by him. I saw him. I couldn't contain my anger, and I called him a liar right to his face in church, feeling horrible about that. I actually went to confession the next Saturday at that church to try and talk myself out of the anger that I was feeling about what I felt was collusion in the Catholic Church. The priest at Incarnation was colluding with what I felt, just to block us away and protect their own teacher. Nonetheless, Father Manning was the priest, and I was in there talking to Father Manning, and I said, look, I'm struggling with this. It was not face-to-face. I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do. My wife says leave it alone, and he identified me by name. He says, well, wait a minute. Is your name, and I, well, how do you know? He goes, well, I've been speaking to Incarnation about you. And basically, he told me that my son was a liar and that all 14 and 15-year-old kids lie about everything, and he's lying, and I just know my son. When they lie, as a parent, when they're lying. And he came clean and told me he was not lying about this to the teacher. Then I got proof that the teacher was lying. And then he said, I'm not going to absolve you. I don't know that I can absolve you. And furthermore, went on to tell me that if I don't back off, because I communicated with the Archdiocese over this, if I don't back off, my son, he basically said that my kids are going to have a hard time finishing at altar or going to altar.
Okay, all right.
What priest does this? I don't understand.
Okay.
I'm so aggravated.
This is a big question. All right, and first of all, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. It is definitely not protocol. It is not protocol at all for a priest in an anonymous confession to identify you by name. All right, and then to call you out and tell you you're wrong about the facts, and then to withhold absolution for that reason. That is absolutely over the top
on every level.
There are very few circumstances under which a priest can withhold absolution. The most common would be if a penitent is not sorry. Now, the sin that you were there to confess, all right, supposedly, if I understand you, is anger. All right. Now, anger at injustice as such is not a sin. It's not a sin. All right. Jesus got angry at injustice. All right. So just the fact that you get your ire up because you see an injustice, that's not sinful. Okay. Now, I'm not going to speak to the question of your personal sin in this because there may be all kinds of contexts that I don't have access to. But let's say you go in to confess an unjust anger. All right. If it were unjust. The only reason the priest could withhold absolution in that circumstance is if you say, I'm unjustly angry, and doggone it, I'm going to keep on being unjustly angry, and I'm not sorry about it. then he could withhold absolution.
Right.
But if I go into a priest and say, I stole a Coke from the Coke machine on Wednesday, and he says, "Oh no, buddy, I was there. It was Thursday," and I'm not absolving you because you don't have your facts right. That doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Secondly, this is absolutely a matter of justice. All right. And so circling the wagons and colluding and trying to, bury the evidence, this kind of thing, very, very wrong. Very, very wrong. Okay. Now, prudentially, you have to raise the question, how much of a big deal do I want to make about this? All right.
True.
And that's, I'd have to dig way down into the dirty, nasty details with you and have a long conversation to be able to answer that question. But I don't think that from what you've described to me, you definitely did not get good pastoral counsel. All right. And that's very, very problematic. My recommendation, at least at this stage, is seek out another confessor. All right, go to another parish. I mean, go to a religious order. Go someplace completely unconnected to this story, and just first of all deal with the question of your own interior life. All right, that's critical. All right, you're going to have to forgive the people that wronged you. All right, because Jesus gives us that, right? If we don't forgive others their sins, He's not going to forgive us. We've wronged God. All right, we've wronged others. We have to forgive those that wrong us. But forgiveness does not mean that you can't pursue justice.
True.
All right. And so there's just layers within this question, and I wish we had time to get into all of them. But, heaven have mercy, my friend. I am sorry for your troubles, and I think you were given bad pastoral counsel.
Appreciate your call, though, Kyle. 53 minutes after the hour. Time for one more quick one from Tommy in Tallahassee, listening to EWTN on 1330 AM. Tommy, just have a moment here. What's your question?
Yeah, quick question. I know we don't have relics of the Blessed Virgin Mary, but do we have relics of St. Joseph?
That is a very good question. Tom, have you ever come across a relic of St. Joseph?
No.
Yeah, I won't say categorically that we don't. I don't have any personal knowledge of relics of St. Joseph.
My understanding is that there is quite a impressive shrine of St. Joseph, a shrine for St. Joseph in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And on our travels later this week and next week, I'm going to try to go through St. Louis and check that out. So maybe I can give a report back next week at this time. Hopefully.
Good.
So, yeah. Tommy, there you go. Sorry we couldn't get to Brian, who wanted to talk about near-death experiences and purgatory. Brian, please call us back at this same time tomorrow on our program. Dr. David Anders, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Tom.
Our thanks also to Elena Rodriguez, filling in as our phone screener today, and Radio Rich on the production side, and of course, Jeff Burson always banging it up on social media. I'm Tom Price. Please join us again next time, and that'll be tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on Call to Communion. For all of us here, you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.